guys, welcome to our first social influence lesson. Today we are going to look at social influence as a topic, also known as social behaviour, social facilitation and social loafing. The learning intention for today is for you to gain an understanding of the topic of social behaviour or social influence and to learn about social facilitation and social loafing. You'll know that you've been successful in this criteria when you are able to describe the topic social behaviour or social influence and are able to describe the conditions for social facilitation and social loafing to occur. So first of all, what is social psychology? Social psychology is the study of the behaviour of others in social situations. This is usually the unintentional influence that either an individual or a group can have on another person. Why do we study social behaviour and social influence? We study social behaviour to better understand how others influence our behaviour and then how to control future attempts to influence us. The study of social behaviour looks at the effects of the presence of others or actions, whether they are real or imagined, on our thoughts, behaviours and feelings. This impact might be positive, negative or neutral, but it's important to note that these behaviours result from a pressure from others, whether this is again real or imagined. I want you to now imagine that you've spent 3 weeks rehearsing and learning for a psychology oral presentation. When you're practicing in front of your mirror at home, you know your speech perfectly. When the due date comes and it's time to perform in front of your teacher and peers, how will you perform? Will the presence of an audience cause you to stumble over your words and forget your speech? Will the presence of an audience inspire you to perform at your best? Psychologists have found that the presence of others can have either a negative or a positive effect. However, the question of whether the effect will always be positive or negative depends on the situation, the complexity or difficulty of the task, and in the presence of others. So, looking at our example, we're going to try and answer the question of how the presence of others will affect your behaviour. Will it help or hinder your oral presentation? According to the concept of social facilitation, the presence of others increases your arousal and leads you to make the most dominant response. So what I mean by dominant response is a response that is most likely to occur. So this means that in your performance, if you practice your speech for hours and weeks on end, you know your lines perfectly and make very few mistakes, then the presence of others will actually help your performance, sometimes giving you some extra motivation to perform really well. However, if you haven't practiced your lines and you make lots of mistakes, then the presence of others is more likely to hinder and harm your performance, more likely to intensify and emphasize the mistakes that you make. So, why would this happen? The presence of others increases your arousal, which means your general psychological and physiological arousal, including heart rate and breathing. These responses we're going to link to the activation of our autonomic nervous system. This arousal leads to the increased likelihood that you will choose the most dominant response. Whether the dominant response is helpful or harmful depends on how easy the task is and how well you have learned or practiced it beforehand, and then over what period of time. We can then boil this down to that the presence of others will enhance performance on simple tasks that we have learned before, but hinder our performance on tasks that are difficult or those that we have not practiced. So in this graph here, you can see that when the arousal is high, but the task is difficult, performance is very low, which is shown in blue. But when the task is easy, performance is high, meaning that you're going to perform better. So, in answer to our question, it really depends on the situation. Like we said, if you've practiced and then the task is easy, when the arousal is high, you're more likely to perform well, but when you have not practiced, then you will not perform well. There are some other factors that can affect our performance in the presence of others, as many psychologists argue that the mere presence of others does not always fully explain why we become aroused before performing a task, and then whether we choose which dominant response. One explanation why the presence of others inhibits or harms our performance is what we know now as the distraction conflict. This theory suggests that the presence of others actually diverts our attention from the task by creating a conflict between performing on the task and then paying attention to the people that are watching us. There is also another effect that we know of, which is called evaluation apprehension. This is what psychologists believe occurs because many of us want to look good to people who we perceive as evaluating us and our performance. So the presence of others who we assume to be our evaluators, so people such as your teacher or the peers that are watching you, lead us to feel quite nervous and then increases our arousal. Therefore, this suggests that the presence of others will help or inhibit your performance, but only if we believe that the people who are watching us, who we'll call observers, are evaluating our performance. This leads us to our next topic, social loafing, and I'll give you another example to think about. So, let's imagine that now the psychology oral presentation is a group oral presentation. We all know that presentations don't always turn out how we want them to, especially when we work in groups. We know that when a group works together towards a common goal, but individual group members are not monitored or evaluated, then the evaluation apprehension effect is weakened and social loafing is more likely to occur. Social loafing is the tendency for an individual to make less effort when involved in a group activity than when working alone. There is always usually that one person in the group who sits back and lets the rest of the group handle the task because they believe that you and the rest of the group will get the work done for them. This leads to a group-produced reduction in individual effort because each individual group member is not being evaluated on their individual effort or contribution to the task. There are many reasons why social loafing can occur. So sometimes it's because individual group members see their contribution as unessential to success and therefore they're less stressed about being personally evaluated. Or they might be trying to avoid being that one person who always does the work and then carries the group. So psychologists have observed two main effects that occur in these group situations, which we'll call the sucker effect and the free rider effect. Some more memes for you. So the sucker effect is where individual workers reduce their contribution to the group because they feel or they perceive that other members of the group are not giving their best effort and then they feel taken advantage of. So it's usually that one person who's quite invested in getting a good grade that others perceive will do all the work because they want to continue getting high grades, but then they feel like a sucker because the other people aren't putting as much effort in, and then they feel like they're going to be expected to do all of the work the night before, so then they sit back. There's also another effect called the free rider effect, and this occurs when group members reduce their effort when they realise that their performance will not suffer by the group and their lack of input won't be noticed by the others or by the overall task in the end. So what I want you to think about is what's going to happen if you're in a group of 5 and 3 out of 5 people in the group believe that their lack of effort won't affect the overall outcome. In the psychology group oral task, the group is more likely to be unproductive and put in less effort, which will cause them to perform badly, especially if we have the presence of both the free rider and the sucker effect. So then, how would we avoid the effects of social loafing? There are many strategies that we can use. Some of them that I'm going to talk about with you guys today are making group members more accountable, so maybe delegating tasks or receiving a grade for individual effort. You can make the groups small, so no more than 4 people, otherwise there's too many people and not enough tasks to delegate. The goal must be challenging, in which the goal must be, or the effort must be required by all group members. More likely to avoid social loafing if the task is meaningful, if it's relevant to you and the group, if there's a reward for maximum effort, so if you get everyone to participate and there's a big reward at the end, so maybe there's a prize or some big recognition that you find valuable. And people are also less likely to engage in social loafing behaviours when they work with friends compared to when they work with strangers, but only in challenging, appealing and important tasks. So they're more likely to work hard when they don't want to let their friends down. So that's all from me today. What we're going to do in the lesson is evaluate some scenarios and then get your feedback on how you found this video.